What happened to super producers? Guys like Timbaland, Pharrell, or Dr. Dre, these producers who had these decade-long runs where they made huge songs and became huge artists. Nowadays, it seems like modern producers are only around for 1 or 2 years and then they quickly fade away. In today's video, I want to explain what I think is happening and why we might not ever see a super producer ever again. Now, there are two really important changes that have happened that I think explain why we might never see a super producer again. One has to do with how the world has changed, and the second has to do with how producers have changed. So let's start with the first reason. In my opinion, this explains a lot of why super producers don't exist today, and why they probably don't even make sense. First, let's think about how music works compared to 15 years ago. What exactly has changed? One huge change is that if an artist wanted to put music out 15 years ago, they did so on one of these. Selling your music required you to put your project on a CD, and this is a huge deal. Let me explain why. If an artist had a project coming out and the label estimated that it could sell 1 million copies, they would have to pay the cost to manufacture 1 million CDs. They would also have to pay the cost to distribute 1 million CDs. And they'd also have to pay the retailers the cost of shelving 1 million CDs. All of this required a lot of money, so now the question becomes, how can I make sure this project succeeds and isn't a big waste of money? At this point, it might be smart to involve a super producer. Super producers had long histories, track records of being able to help a project succeed. And since failing had such massive repercussions, involving a super producer actually made sense financially. Even if they charged $500,000 for a beat, that isn't as big of a cost in the grand scheme of things when we think about all of the other costs associated with putting out a project. Now let's consider how this has changed and where we are today. All of those costs that I just mentioned, the potential millions of dollars it costs to put your music out, those costs are mostly gone. Manufacturing costs are basically zero because people listen to music on their phone and the cost of creating a file is nothing. Distribution costs, same thing. You and I can both pay $40 a year and our music can easily be on Spotify and Apple Music right next to the biggest names in the world. And retail fees, exact same thing. So 15 years ago, if your music flopped, you could have lost millions of dollars. Now if you flop, you don't lose anywhere near as much. The cost for being wrong and the amount of financial risk is just far less nowadays. And this is why super producers don't really make sense today. Is it a smart idea to pay a super producer that same $500,000 today? Not really. In the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of proof that a hit can come out of nowhere, and that a $50 beat can do the same numbers that a $500,000 beat can. There have just been so many unknown producers who have been able to produce huge songs that end up being successful hits. So again, if I'm an artist or a label, does it make sense to take my entire production budget and spend it all on one super producer's beat and have just one chance of having that song catch on? Or maybe I should just work with a lot of smaller producers that no one really knows about and see if one of those songs catches on. Because in the last 5 years, we now have irrefutable proof that you can get pretty similar outcomes from either. But there's yet another factor that's equally important that we're not talking about, and that has to do with how much producers have changed as well. If you watch this video that I put out a while ago, I talked about why producers often don't make as much money as artists, and the ideas in that video tie into this very well. Often we can get confused and think that the quality of the music was why super producers got paid so much. Personally, I don't think this is a comprehensive enough view. We need to have a better understanding of the value that a super producer actually brought. So what did they actually do? Fundamentally, the thing that artists and labels value from producers, a big reason why they were willing to pay super producers so much money, was because these producers brought attention to their projects. These super producers would at times show up in music videos, they would rap a verse on a song or do the hook, and if people saw these super producers were involved with a project, they would start to pay more attention, and that's fundamentally what made them so worthwhile. Now, I don't want to undermine their actual music. They were obviously extremely amazing at what they did, but they did more than just make amazing music. These producers had a lot of fans themselves. But once again, let's compare this to now. Most modern producers just don't create that same value for themselves. And this can also explain why modern producers seemingly only have a 1 to 2 year run most often. The cycle seems to be that they have their initial success that comes from an inexpensive beat, a song blows up, and then they start to raise their production fees by using their past success as leverage. But after that initial success, their songs may not perform as well because they can't replicate that same attention from their first hit. They aren't able to create that attention consistently enough. At that point, having their name attached to a song doesn't really generate any more attention, and at that point, artists may no longer have that same incentive to work with them, especially if producers start demanding more upfront money for their production. And I don't want to diminish how good modern producers are or say that their music is in any way worse. Even when we look at songs that come out today that those same super producers from back in the day produce, they commonly don't even attract as much attention as they once did. Our landscape has just changed so much, and most modern day producers aren't actually dealing in what's valuable today. Modern producers just aren't creating that value for themselves. And in my opinion, that's exactly what most producers should start doing, creating value in the modern landscape. Not by believing their music is just so amazing that everyone's going to want to work with them, but by creating something that's actually valuable for artists, which is attention and more potential fans for an artist. So if you're a producer, just like I mentioned in the video a while back, I really do think the best thing you can do for yourself is to think about how you can start creating your own platform and build your own fan base. As I mentioned, I put a video a while back that ties very nicely into this video, so if you haven't watched it, I'll put that on the screen right now. I talk more about the idea of value and how producers can increase their value, so check it out. Anyways, I hope you liked this video. If you did, like and subscribe, and I'll see you later.